Hello fam, Mrs. Vore here to go over comparing distributions with you. I mentioned in the last video, I don't know if it was the last one, I've recorded so many videos at this point that I can't keep track of them, but this skill will show up on your exam for this unit, the exam that I'm giving you. So I will ask you to compare two distributions. In fact, it might even be three. I think the one that I give you is 3 box plots that you have to compare. So this particular skill is very important in terms of being able to do well on your unit test. I will give you a little bit more practice on this before you test, so if you're feeling a little bit unsure, you will have more opportunities to give it a try and compare your answer to what the correct answer is. But just beware as I'm going through the check for understanding on this that this will be on your test 100%. It will be one of your free response problems. I believe the other one is a histogram, but I will let you know before the test what your free response ones are going to be so that you can get prepared for that as much as you need to. So I just want to show you my completed notes because what we had, the video that I gave you guys for this was from last year. So what I have this year may be a little bit different than what you saw. So you can go through and compare your notes to mine if you'd like to. I would recommend it, but if you're short on time or if you're just like, no, then don't do it. Just fast forward to the solutions. So these are my fill in the blanks. You can just pause as needed. One very important thing, and I think I mentioned this in the video, is that when you're comparing two distributions, they want you to use comparing words. So they explicitly want you to use words like greater than, less than, or about the same as. So if you look through most of my comparisons, you can see that I highlight those comparing phrases. Larger, varies more, less than, about the same. So this page, I don't think that there's really anything that changed. I'll just slide through it so that you can see what I have written down. And then this is the one that you might want to check. I don't know that I really wrote anything differently, but I do have a little bit of feedback on this one. So I've often talked about how, or I hope it's been often, when you go to take your test, the first thing that you should do is run through it and answer all of the questions that you know how to do right off the bat. When I used to test, I would never skip questions, but nobody ever really talked to me about test-taking skills. So for this class in particular, the best way to do it is to do all the questions that you can first, because the AP exam is designed in such a way that they're not really expecting you to make it through every single free response question. They do want you to make it through all of the multiple choice because you can guess on ones that you don't know. But on the free response, there is so many free response questions that you're not going to make it through all of them unless you're on track to get a 5 on the exam. So what that means is you should not spend a long amount of time on any one problem. You should answer the questions that you know how to do immediately, even if it's like, okay, I can only do part 2 and part 4. Do part 2 and part 4 and then go to the next question, because you'll get points for everything that you get done. You would much rather answer a little bit of each question than stick on one question for the entire time and only be able to complete one full question. So that being said, that ties to these comparing distributions problems. Now, the most important part of these is that you touch on every element that is important. So you want to use your SUCS acronym. You want to try to mention shape, unusual points, center, spread. You want to use comparing words. So you need to say greater than, less than, the same as. But the least important thing is giving the specific values. So when I go through and do a free response question for comparing distributions, I will go through, eyeball it, make statements like greater than, less than, and then I will come back to it and actually list the actual values if I have time. And the reason for that is because, like on box plots and histograms, it does take a minute for you to estimate what these values are. So you can't see it on this graph because I didn't copy it down, but you can see it on the next problem that I did. These estimating the numbers can take quite a bit of time, so don't do that unless you have the time. So that being said, I'm going to let you know what you could have left out if you were short on time. So the distribution is straightforward. You have 2 right skewed and 1 approximately symmetric. 2 had outliers, 1 did not. Now this is where you could omit the specific values. So for center, you could say the medians for Maine and Connecticut are about the same, or are not that far apart, but the annual income or the median for Massachusetts is the largest. So you could say Maine and Connecticut are pretty close to each other. The typical salary, annual salary for Maine and Connecticut are close to each other, separated by only about $20,000, but the typical annual income for Massachusetts is the largest. And leave out these values. You don't have to specifically say 40,000, 60,000, 95,000. Is that 95,000? Oh, it's the center. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking the max. So just know that as long as you're using comparing words, Massachusetts is the largest, and then Connecticut and Maine are closer to each other. I think that would have been enough to earn you full credit. For spread, annual income varies the most for Massachusetts, with an IQR of 1/3000. The IQR for Maine and Connecticut are both about 50,000. So once again, you can say the annual income varies the most in Massachusetts with the largest IQR, and it's less for Maine and Connecticut, and they have about the same IQR. And then you leave out all these values so that you don't have to waste time on that. So I'll just say that one more time. You could earn full credit without giving any specific values as long as you're using phrasing such as greater than, less than, or about the same. But if you have the time, you should absolutely go back and add it in. So that all being said, this is what I have for the corporations. So the distribution of yearly salary for Corporation A is right skewed with 2 high outliers, and then I wrote down where they were at approximately 71,000 and 78,000. I don't know why I have a parenthesis there. The distribution for Corporation B is approximately symmetric with no outliers. Now, if you go up here and find the values of the left and right side, there is a slight left skew, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. So to me, the difference between the left and the right-hand side is close enough that I would just go with roughly symmetric. If you are going to say skew, just say slight left skew. It's a slight left skew. The median of each distribution is about the same. So what I have highlighted is what you would absolutely need. The value of those medians is 51,000. Notice that I am giving the context. The typical salary for both corporations is approximately same. The median of the distribution is about 51,000, so the typical salary of, I think that was supposed to say of, both corporations is approximately the same. And then lastly, this one I was very specific on what you could leave out. The distribution for Corporation A varies more than the distribution for Corporation B. The range and IQR are greater for A than for B. So I've said varies more and greater. And then if you have the time, you'll say the range in IQR for A I have up here, and the range in IQR for B is right here. I'll show you those values one more time if you want to pause and see where I'm getting them from. And if your values are slightly off from mine, that's totally fine. If you have 43,000 instead of 42, if you have 8,000 instead of 9,000, or 10,000 instead of 9,000, you're fine. We're just estimating here. Okay, the multiple choice number 2 is echo, and I've corrected what was wrong in these statements. So let me show you a picture of what I have here. It's important to note that at option echo, option E, this is showing you that 50%, because this is 25% here, 25% here, 50% of shoppers spent more time at the grocery store than all of the females, which means 50% of males spent at least as much time at the grocery store as any female or all females. Then I'll pause on this so that you can see how I corrected these statements. Number 3 is beta. Box plots are such that we don't know how many observations are in each data set, so we can't be making statements about how much data is in each set. So 1 and 2 are not options. They're not true, but 3 is. And 3, you can see that just by looking at them. A is longer than B. Okay, so for number 4, I was just making sure that I numbered these right, sorry. I tried to do this without, by just eyeballing it and without giving any values to the histogram. So the first thing that I used to eliminate options was the fact that this histogram is symmetric. So that eliminates options D and E, because D is right skewed and E is left skewed. Then the next thing I used was that there are no outliers. So remember, if we don't have a gap in the data from what we think is the outlier to the rest of the data, then it usually isn't an outlier. So these, I shouldn't say these, there are no outliers in this data set, which eliminates C. And then from there, I had a really hard time knowing if it was alpha or beta. I couldn't figure out, well, what would make the middle 50% longer or shorter. So eventually I just decided, okay, well, I'll just assign values to what I think these bars match. So I labeled this as, this would be 2 observations, 3 observations, so on and so forth. So this is 25 observations. This is 25 observations, and then I estimated where my quartiles would be, and that aligns with A. Now, you could reason through this in your head without doing that, because quartiles divide your data set up into quarters. So if you are looking at this histogram, to get 25% of the data starting from the middle, there's so few observations here that this middle 50% is going to be longer. Because there are fewer observations, that's going to stretch that middle 50% out. And then there's a bunch of observations here, and so these upper and lower 25% are going to be shorter, because you have so many observations in a short interval of values. So if you look at this, like these two are 16 observations, and that's very short. But then these, from these 3 boxes, are only 9 observations, and that's very long. So to get 25% of the data from the middle outward, you would be stretching that middle out very far, and then your tails are shorter because there's so much data here. And in my mind, it would have been opposite. I would have been thinking, well, there's so much data on the ends, so my ends are probably longer, and then there's only a little bit of data in the middle, so my middle 50% is shorter. And I actually chose this option, recorded the solutions, and then when I was describing that to you, thought, I don't think that that's right. And that's what led me to give these values. And then I had to work backward and think, okay, well, why does that make sense? So it makes sense to me now, but it was very hard for me to come to that conclusion without the numbers. So this middle 50% is stretched out farther because there's fewer observations. The tails are shorter because there's so many observations. And then lastly, number 5 is delta. Once again, you can see all of the notes I added in. So hopefully that is helpful if you got that one wrong. Most of the time with these box plots questions, or any questions that are like which one is true, I typically will go through and fix the statements so that they are true. That's my way of verifying that that's not the option. These 4 problems, so 2, 3, 4, 5, are very reflective of the difficulty level of the multiple choice on your actual AP exam. So they're very rarely ever just quick and straightforward. They're having you evaluate more than one statement. You're really having to think critical about the answer options. So you should leave this assignment feeling very confident about these problems if you are planning to do well on not only this unit exam, but the actual AP exam. So make sure that if you have any questions on any of this check for understanding in particular, you get them cleared up, because this is a really, really good, or I should say this is really, really good preparation for your exams. Okay, I think that's it. Next up is your review. Miss you guys. Hope I get to see you soon. Love you.